Good evening and welcome to Have a Seat with Chris Hansen tonight again from New York City as we continue our investigation into Dahvie Vanity, Jesus Torres of the group Blood on the Dance Floor, and allegations that he sexually assaulted and groomed dozens, if not hundreds, of young women over about a 10-year period. Tonight we have with us Megan Hood and Elizabeth Faaborg, who are survivors of Dahvie Vanity, and they'll tell us a very gripping story about their interaction with him. And we also have Jesselyn Cook, who's a reporter with the Huffington Post, who, along with her reporting partner, Sebastian Murdoch, really broke ground on this story several months up to a year ago and provided a bit of a roadmap for the rest of us who are looking into it now. So it'll be interesting to get her perspective on all this and her input. And I want to jump right in with Megan Hood, who joins us tonight. Megan, thanks for being with us. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Thanks for being on, and thanks for having the courage to tell your story. I appreciate it. These things are not easy, as you know, and you've tried to tell it once before and got so much hate on social media that you sort of backed off a little bit. Let's start at the beginning. How did you first become aware of Dahvie Vanity and Blood on the Dance Floor?
Honestly, it was back in the MySpace days. I definitely discovered him through MySpace. And the first time I met him was back at the Epic Tour. I believe this was 2010. And I loved that band with my entire heart for whatever reason. But so, yeah, just MySpace, social media, stuff like that.
And so did you reach out to him? Did he see you were following him and reach out to you? Or how did that all work in the very beginning?
Well, I actually didn't formally meet him until probably a little bit after that. I want to say it was the next tour, All the Rage tour, I believe. But he had recognized me just from being in the crowd.
And you saw him after the concert, what, at the merch table in that area?
Yes, and we got a picture together that night.
And what was the conversation with him that night? How old were you at the time?
I was 11 years old. So I was
11 years old.
A child, yes, a literal child.
11 years old, you're at a Blood on the Dance Floor concert. Who are you with? Who took you to this concert?
So I wasn't actually with my parents. I had some older friends who accompanied me to that concert along with my sister. And my parents trusted them to take good care of me, and they did.
And what was the interaction that night? You just spoke with him? Was it just a typical fan performer type thing, or what happened?
Yeah, it was very brief. It was just nice to meet you.
And that was a big event in the life of an 11-year-old fan of that particular band and that performer.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
How did you feel when you left his company that night?
Starstruck. I mean, ecstatic. I was so happy I finally got to meet him in person after loving his music for so long.
And what happened after that? How long until you heard from him or saw him again?
Until the next concert. There would be, comments online here and there just from me reaching out to him, telling him like, hey, good job on this song, or, just nothing really serious until a little bit later on.
At what point did this turn a corner and he started to pursue you romantically?
Okay, so this was 2014 because I was 15 or 16 years old and I had lost a significant amount of weight. And so I basically was, turning into a woman. I was not a woman yet. I was still a girl, obviously. And I went to one of his shows. I never missed one. And I woke up that next day to a message from him on Facebook asking me what I was doing that day. I looked really good at the concert, and he wants to hang out with me because he had a day off in Denver.
And that's where you were living at the time, and that's where the concert was, in Colorado.
Yes.
So you're 15, 16 years old, and this rock star who is a hero to you musically, contacts you personally and says you want to hang out. You must have been blown away by this in a way.
Absolutely. Yeah, I did not know what to think of it. And, silly me, I thought he just wanted to pursue a friendship, which was something that I wanted, greatly.
Well, why wouldn't you as a teenager? You've got this famous person and somebody you hold in high esteem. It seems like a cool thing.
Yeah, and he had been in my life for about 5 years or 4 years. And I had built lots of friendships around that band, and they were a big part of my life. And so I was very happy, very excited.
Did you feel a sense of community with the other fans? Did you know some other people? Like at the time, for instance, we're going to talk to Elizabeth in just a minute here, but you knew Elizabeth from that circle of people at some point, right?
Yes, she was very, very close with me. We've been close for about 10 years now.
All right, so you meet Dahvie. Where do you go? What do you do? What happens that day?
He invited me to go see a movie with him, and we went to go see X-Men. And I didn't drive. I didn't, I was a child. And so my aunt actually took me downtown to go see this movie with him. And he was with his producer, I think, at the bar at the time. And we had set a time to go meet up. And I went to our meeting place at that time, and he was at the bar with his producer, didn't tell me where he was. And so I sat there, and it was raining outside. I sat alone downtown in the rain, waiting for him for over an hour before he finally got back to me. Very dangerous, and we went to the movies that night, and he was asking me all these weird questions. He was being very vague and cryptic, telling me that he's going to miss me so much because he's not going to see me for an indefinite period of time, and we needed to end that night on a good note. So
he said he wanted to end that night on a good note. Did you have any inkling as to what he meant?
No.
As a 15, 16-year-old girl?
No, and mind you, I was completely innocent. I'd never had any romantic experiences in my entire life. And
all you know is you're at a movie with Dahvie Vanity.
Yeah, and I thought this was supposed to be a friendly thing, and I had no idea what he was meaning by that. And he ended up kissing me that night during the movie. I mean, I swear I probably did not watch a single minute of that movie because he was just all over me.
What was going through your mind as he was physically trying to get with you?
I was really taken back, obviously, but also I wasn't stopping it because I was, I loved the man, not like in a romantic way, but I held him very high. And so I didn't stop it. And I was actually very excited after he kissed me that night. And mind you, this was my first kiss ever. I wasted my first kiss.
Your first kiss was with Dahvie Vanity?
Yes.
How did the night wrap up?
I went home, and my aunt had picked me up and taken me home. He actually talked to my aunt that night, and my aunt was very, very rude. She knew what I didn't, obviously. She's like, there's no business, with a 30-year-old man and a 15-year-old girl going to the movies. There's no reason for this. But fast forward a little bit, and I was home, and he called me later on that night because even though we had just hung out, he wanted to see me again. After that, he told me that we had unfinished business, and I lived with my parents, obviously, and they're very strict. So I told him no. I said everywhere's closed. It was past midnight. I think it was about 2 o'clock in the morning when this conversation was taking place. And he was like, let's go to a Denny's or, some 24-hour place where we can hang out. And I just kept telling him no. And come on, let me just see how far this hotel is from you. So he got my address. And
did he trick you into getting the address?
No, I gave it to him just because to see how far he was from me, if it would take all night for him to get me back home safely or, get me out and about. And
so it's 2 o'clock. It's 2 o'clock in the morning. You're at home. You're your night is finished, and he's trying to get you back out without your parents knowing.
Yes, exactly.
What you're up to.
And I had already done my nightly routine. I was in my pajamas in bed. And so I live in the basement. My signal is pretty bad on my cell phone. And he kept telling me that I was breaking up. So I had to go outside. And to my surprise, he was outside of my house when I went outside.
Wait,
and
he
did not
was
tell me.
already there. He never told you this on the phone that he was coming. He tricked
Right, yeah.
you essentially into coming outside, and he's there. And is he in a car? Is he in the tour van, the bus? What's he driving?
He was in the tour van. Yes.
So he's in the van. So
So
this
he
big
left all of
van,
his. Sorry.
he ditches his bandmates,
Yes.
and he drives the big van to your house.
Mhm.
And do you go in it, or what happens then?
Yeah, so I was just in shock. I didn't know what his plans were. We didn't have a set plan. I didn't know why he wanted to hang out, because I live in a, very small town away from the city. There's nowhere to do anything around here. And he said, let's just hang out in the van. I was like, okay, in my pajamas, no makeup on, nothing, because I wanted to go to bed. And he pulled the same thing that he did at the movie theater, pretty much just telling me that he's going to miss me so much, and asking me if I'm going to miss him, and we need to end this on a better note, like we have unfinished business. And I still didn't really know what he meant. But yeah, I had a better idea after he had kissed me, yes.
What did he do to you, Megan, inside the van?
So I did end up giving him oral sex that night, and he was very, very violent. And I mean, I was bleeding. He was ripping my hair out. He wouldn't let me breathe. It was my first ever experience like that, ever.
I'm sorry you had to go through that, and my heart breaks for you, retelling the story these years later. I'm sure you relived that moment dozens and dozens of times. I mean, what kind of person does that to a 15, 16-year-old girl?
Yeah, and it definitely haunts me sometimes, but I also feel like it's something that I have repressed, and I haven't really had the chance to talk about it or deal with it. But for being my first experience, it definitely warped my perception of, what intimacy should be. And it has followed me into adulthood, definitely.
This happens, traumatized, bleeding, sexually assaulted. There's no other way to put it.
Right, and I also feel like my privacy was really invaded that night also. I almost feel like I was stalked. I know I gave him my address, but I didn't, ever think that he would just come to my house without telling me, especially when I live with my parents and they could have easily caught him. It's like he wasn't being careful, like he just didn't care.
Looking back, did he seem like he had a feeling of entitlement, like
Yeah.
this was the next notch on his belt, that
Absolutely.
you were going to be the one that night, no matter what you said or how you responded. He was going to have his way.
Yes, absolutely. He definitely was set on it, and was very persistent, to the point where I felt like I didn't really have a choice but to give him what he wanted, because he wasn't going to stop. In fact, actually, thinking back to that night, I remember telling him I have to get back inside. My parents probably realize I'm gone at this point. And he got very hostile with me, very angry, and was just like, okay, see you next time, just being short. Like, he was angry that I didn't give him what he wanted. So that's finally when I was just like, okay, well, I don't want any bad blood with you. I don't want you to hate me.
He manipulated you.
Absolutely.
Did you tell anybody about this, Megan?
Yes. Well, I told Elizabeth, actually, that he kissed me that night. I didn't tell anybody about, the full extent of what happened that night, but she was actually at his house when I told her that. And this was probably, I don't even know how long it was after this that I told Elizabeth, but I did tell Elizabeth that he kissed me. And when she was there, she asked him, "Hey, is this true? Did you kiss Megan?" And he called me and made me publicly call myself a liar in front of all of his roommates.
He made you get on the phone and say that you were a liar in front of
Yes.
everybody in his house?
Yes. I don't know.
How did that make you feel?
Humiliated. I was completely humiliated. And he knew what he was doing, absolutely. And it's almost like he just gets off on that. He loves humiliating people.
Let's bring in Elizabeth Faaborg now. Elizabeth, you
Hi.
have been listening. Hi, thanks for being with us tonight. How you doing?
I'm okay, thank you.
You're very courageous to come forward, and I appreciate it. You listen to what Megan has said. You know Megan's story. You went through a very similar experience with Dahvie Vanity.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about that, and then let's talk about the phone call you got from Elizabeth that night when you were actually at Dahvie Vanity's home.
Yeah. So, do you want me to talk about just that night or my experience in general?
Talk about that night, and then we'll back up and we'll talk about how you first met him and got involved in this.
Okay. So that night I was working with their merch guy at the time, and I was doing like a lot of t-shirt work and just kind of helping out. So I was at his house like a lot, and Megan had told me beforehand, and she was in town, I believe, at the time. And so I asked Dahvie, like, did this happen? Like, what's going on here? Like, is there something I need to know about? Because at the time I was 16, I think. So I was kind of concerned because I was like, I know Megan's 15. Like, is that like real? Like, did that really happen? And he was like, no, there's no way that happened. Like, she's lying. Like, she's a liar. Like I'm going to block her and her sister. And so he did block them. And then I told him, like, that wasn't cool. Like, you need to talk to them about it. Obviously, if she is lying, because he had to be so manipulated at the time, like, you need to squash that. Like, you need to talk to her. So he got on the phone with her, and it was me and the merch guy at the time who were, like, kind of there. And he kept her on speaker, but told us to not talk. And he basically made her say, like, oh, that never happened, I'm lying, and, like, make, like, amends over the phone. And, like, he was very reassuring that, like, oh, we're still friends, though. And I think that was to kind of keep her at bay and make her not say anything again.
And Elizabeth, what was your relationship with Dahvie Vanity at the time?
At that time, we were really close friends.
And how old are you? You were 16 years old?
Yeah, I was 16.
And how did you come to be his merch person?
I wouldn't say that I was like a merch person. I just kind of was really friendly with the people who did it. But I met Dahvie when I was 12. I met him on tour. I was a big fan of the music. And then we talked online a lot over the years. And every time he would come to San Diego, I would go to the show. And so when I was 16, he moved to San Diego, and I had just kind of like started to look mature, you know, and he was very mad at, like, oh, we need to hang out. Like, you're like the one person I know that lives here. Like, we should hang out all the time. Like, I'll pick you up. I'll come to you. Like, we'll hang out. And he did. We hung out a lot, but it never was anything out of the ordinary. I thought everything was normal, but it never occurred to me that a 30-year-old man should not be hanging out with a 16-year-old girl.
And how did your relationship with Dahvie progress, Elizabeth?
I would say there was always like an underlying like sexual energy about it, but I never picked up on it because, you know, I was 16 and I'm not thinking about that at the time. And nothing really happened until actually my 18th birthday, which is quite unusual for him. So we were really good friends, and he would call our like hangouts dates and stuff, but I didn't think it was wrong. And he would like call me beautiful and like tell me I was pretty and tell me he loved me, but I didn't think it was something that you didn't say to your friend until he crossed that line.
And what happened on your 18th birthday?
So my 18th birthday, everyone planned to go to LA to go to Bar Sinister. That's been talked about, I think, previously before.
Sure.
And he had all my friends who knew him come to his house, and he wanted us to like pregame and drink and smoke. And then he was going to drive all of us up to LA. Mind you, he had been drinking and smoking, which not great. And that was the plan. So I went over there early to pregame, and he got me alone in his room to help him with his makeup, and he started like touching my chest and like saying like really like outwardly sexual things, and I was like so confused because that was never the way our friendship went. And then he texted me to follow him later on, so we were ready to go, and I followed him inside, and he like pushed me down on an office chair in his room, and he like forced my head into his crotch and just kind of forced me to perform oral sex with no consent or option. And then he told me, "Don't ever tell anyone what happened. I'll kill you."
He said, don't ever tell anyone what happened or I'll kill you.
Yeah. And I was shocked, and I was like, I asked him, "Have you been wanting to do that since you met me?" And he said, "Yes, of course." And I said, "I was 12 when we met." He goes, "Yeah, I know."
Who does this?
A sick person, someone who needs help.
And again, you're a survivor here. This is not your fault, and I can't say this enough.
Yeah, it's completely his fault.
And so the night continues, like, at least in his behavior, nothing had happened?
He treated me like nothing was wrong. I was sitting in the car with all of my friends driving to LA, like about to go to a party, and I'm just like, what the heck just happened to me?
He sexually assaulted you.
Yeah.
And threatened to kill you.
Yeah.
Then you hop in a car to head up to LA to go to Bar Sinister.
Yeah, and he was my ride home. And so I just was like, well, I have to be nice because I need him to take me home.
How did he exercise this psychological sexual control over you and so many others?
I think
looking at this and speaking with so many of the survivors, it's a pattern clearly here.
Yeah, it's the same story.
How did he have control over you like that?
I think for me, he laid a groundwork. Like, he made a connection with me personally, made a connection with my parents so that they felt comfortable having me around. And he would feed you like all these, like, I don't know if they were lies or not, but he'd be like, "I love you, I care about you, you're my best friend." He would do things for you. He would buy you dinner. He would take you to the movies and be like, "My treat." And so he kind of would establish like what would seem like a normal friendship. So you thought that there was nothing wrong, and then he would cross the line.
Jesselyn Cook, I want to bring you in here. The Huff Post. Thanks for being with us tonight. How are you?
I'm good, thanks.
So your excellent reporting, along with Sebastian Murdoch, really moved this whole investigation, this story, to a different level. You look at it now, how did this guy get away with it, Dahvie Vanity, Jesus Torres, for so long? And how, in hindsight, after reporting on it, after talking to so many of the survivors, after hearing what you're hearing tonight, how did he manipulate these young women? And he's not been brought to justice yet. I mean, things are starting to happen, but I mean, we're talking about a 10-year history of sexual assault, coercion, and threats, and not facing any consequences virtually, except, an arrest here and a questioning in Florida.
I think Megan and Elizabeth really put this well. He's extremely charming, extremely manipulative, and he is willing to put in the time that it takes to make someone feel comfortable, to make them feel like they're friends. He'll get to know people's parents and send them, text messages, video calls, phone calls, and really build up that trust. And he also chooses his targets really carefully. He picks young girls who idolize him and would die to meet him and who trust him and look up to him. And, he just, from what I've heard from these interviews, just like wields this pseudo fame as the lead singer of Blood on the Dance Floor. And I'm sure it also helps that he doesn't seem to feel any remorse time after time.
And you're talking about somebody who is still out there today by multiple accounts communicating with underage girls. We've seen this. We've seen young women come forward as recently as, in the last couple of weeks that he's continuing to communicate with young women and even trying to set up dates in spite of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Yeah, I think part of it too is he has this online portrayal of himself. If you look at his Instagram account, for example, he just seems like this goofy, dorky guy who loves his cat and who's friendly and silly. And I think that's all part of the game to him, and that's all part of this master manipulation that he has been doing for so long.
What do you think it is that makes him act this way, behave this way, commit these crimes? Did you come across anything in your reporting that suggests anything that happened to him, or how he turned out this way, or how he became such, by all accounts, a monster preying on vulnerable young women?
I'm not sure if anything in his past might be affecting his behavior, but I do know he's been getting away with it. And when you have this consistent pattern of impunity, why would he stop? He's been investigated by the police. There's a police report confirming that he raped a teenage girl, and he's still out there, still at large. Why would he stop?
Do you think there was an attitude amongst some law enforcement that, okay, the victim wasn't willing to come forward in some cases, that this was a he said, she said thing, it's the rock star lifestyle? Did he get a pass on some of these things?
Yeah, that was something Sebastian and I found in our reporting. We spoke to a detective who investigated Dahvie when he was 22 and his victim was 14. And it really is a failure on the part of police. Even if you have a victim of sexual assault who maybe doesn't feel comfortable, maybe doesn't want to get there, idle in trouble, when it is an incident of sexual assault against a minor who does not even have the ability to consent, it's out of their hands. It's not up to a victim in that case whether or not Dobby should have been arrested or whether a prosecutor should have pressed charges. So the woman I'm referring to, Diana Farrell, who is quoted in our story, she says now too that she is really disappointed that police didn't pursue that case further back when it happened.
Elizabeth, did you tell anybody about this back in the day when it happened? What Dobby did to you? Did you ever tell your parents or friends, or did you ever even consider going to law enforcement? Elizabeth?
There I am. Did it work?
There you are.
There
Okay.
you go, Elizabeth.
I told my friends who didn't know him or have any contact with him at the time, just so I was kind of shocked by it, and I wanted their opinion, so I told them, but they were they didn't really respond to it as oh, you should speak up. I kind of just kept it quiet.
And what happened with the relationship between you and Dobby after that night?
After that, he tried to continue doing it. There was another incident that happened when they were on tour. He came home to San Diego and he told me his girlfriend and him broke up and that it was all cool that we could be together. Because he had me on this this leash that we were going to be in a relationship and he loved me and he wanted to be with me eventually. And that was very obviously not the case. So it happened again, same situation. And I just went along with it. And then our relationship kind of changed back to the way it was when I was 16. We were just friends and nothing sexual would happen. And I had immense feelings for him at that time. the Stockholm syndrome was hard. Like, and I asked him about it. I was like, hey, like, why has this kind of stopped? And he was like, well, I mean, you're lame now and you don't drink. So if you were drunk, something would happen. But otherwise, like, we're just going to stay friends.
And how long between the two incidents, the first night when he assaulted you and the second night when there was another sexual interaction?
It was October is my birthday, and then they came back on tour in December, so 2 months.
2 months. And how did he treat you after that second encounter?
He got kind of distant. I think he kind of got what he wanted, and he got a new girlfriend. And so he goes through like ebbs and flows of having girlfriends where he will cheat on them or he will actually be loyal. So he was being loyal for once in his life. And so he kind of stopped talking to me for a few months.
What did that do to you to know that he used you, assaulted you on 2 occasions, and then said, oh, well, I got a girlfriend now? I mean, how does that make you feel that you weren't, in his eyes, a girlfriend material? You were just there for him to use and sexually assault.
Oh, it hurt. Yeah, it hurt a lot. And I would spend like a lot of nights like crying about it. I would call my friends who knew about it, and like it hurt my feelings a lot, and it still hurts me.
How did it change you long term? How has this impacted you, Elizabeth?
Sorry. I think now, because that was like my first sexual experience, I feel like it's harder for me to feel comfortable with men in that way, because like that innocence was taken away from me, and I don't have a healthy foreground for it. So I think now to this day, like I still have a hard time like having sex with men, and I think I still have a hard time feeling like I can trust someone because he took my trust and betrayed it.
Megan, let me ask you, how did Dobby treat you after that night in the tour van? Did you hear from him again? Did you continue to be in contact? What happened?
Yes, we actually became very close. And kind of touching on what Elizabeth has been saying, he's just very charming, and I wanted to maintain this friendship that I had with him. And so we just kept in touch online and stuff, and he would text me frequently. We would actually he ended up flying me out to go see him in California because he knew that I had friends out there that I would be able to stay with, because if I stayed with him, that's a red flag, right? He didn't want that. And so I went out there to California. He bought me a one-way ticket, and I was kind of confused as to why he had only bought one and not the other. And he told me that it was just like a rough time with finances at that point, and that he was getting paid soon. He was getting paid when I was out there, and that he would be able to buy my ticket when I was out there.
And how long did you stay on that trip?
Probably a week, but I was with my friend most of the time. I would just see him every now and then. We would hang out, go get dinner or something.
Did you have an encounter with him as well?
Yes. And so that's kind of when it became a normal thing for him and I. It was the first time that I went out to go see him.
And how long did this continue, Megan?
Not very long before I kind of realized what was happening. I'd say within a span of a year. Definitely he did not talk to me at all after I turned 18, that's for sure.
So once you turned 18, he was done with you?
Yes, but I also had released a video about my experience with him, so he cut ties with me, yes.
Tell me about that. What was in the video? Why did you release it?
I released it.
What did you want people to know?
Okay, yeah. So at that time, he still had quite the army behind him. Lots of people supported him and were kind of blind to the truth. And the only person who had released any statement, I believe, at that time was Damien, formerly known as Jesse Slaughter. And obviously they had a ton of harassment and backlash, death threats, etc. So I decided to just do it and take the heat because I felt if I did nothing, then it would eat me alive.
And what did you say in the video, Megan?
Just talked about how he coerced me and manipulated me into performing favors for him, like, and going back to when I was in California that first time, he actually made me give him, oral sex and perform these sexual favors to get my way home. Like, this was kind of just this ultimatum that he gave me. He's like, you do this or I'm not buying your ticket home.
Wait. So he flies you out there one way under the ruse of not having enough money for a round trip ticket, but he'll take care of it in a week. You're out there seeing a friend. You have an encounter with him physically. And then he says, you have to keep doing this. Otherwise, I'm not going to buy you a ticket home.
Yeah. And I think that conversation actually took place before the first time, or the second time, but the first time on that trip.
That sounds like human trafficking to me.
Yes. And I did kind of hear a little bit of what Blair White said on her interview with you. She talked about it because my story is also in the Huffington Post. And so yes, that was me.
Did you ever go to law enforcement?
I did not.
And why didn't you think that was an option, Megan?
So something that's very strange, because I think it was kind of the trust factor that went into this. He trusted Elizabeth, and he did not trust me at all after me calling or telling Elizabeth that he kissed me that night, right? His trust is broken with me. He would go through my phone every time I saw him, and he would check my camera roll, make sure I didn't have any pictures or videos of him. He would go through my texts, make sure I wasn't talking about being with him. I mean, everything, social media, everything.
So he actually took your phone to check your text to make sure you weren't communicating with Elizabeth or anybody else, or had any pictures of him that would be incriminating.
And he would take it upon himself to delete the text that I had with him also, to make sure that they were completely gone.
And you allowed him to do this?
No. I mean the
he
very first time he did it.
Intimidated you into
He actually got physical. I mean, I had a bruise on my wrist for a long time the first time he did it. And after that point, I knew he was serious and that he would go to great extents to erase all the evidence.
Were you afraid of him?
Yes.
Did you think he would hurt you if you didn't go along with what he said?
Yes.
What do you think would have happened if you did not succumb to his sexual request?
I've never really thought about that. I don't think that he would have killed me, but I definitely think he would have probably gotten very physically violent.
And what happened after you released that video?
Same thing that happened to Damien. I was being severely harassed, and I lost all of my friends that I had built around this guy. I mean, most of my friends were online at the time, and all of those friends that I had online loved him and didn't want to open their eyes to the truth, because I was one of the first people to speak out about it. And so, yeah, I lost a significant amount of people, and I also was getting death threats. And I had just had a baby at the time.
So you had just had a baby, you were
Yeah.
getting death threats, the backlash was violent and furious.
Yeah.
What was the lesson at that time for you when it came to speaking out about this abuse?
I kind of just felt like I needed to shut up and just stay quiet about it and hide in the shadows. And that's why I'm here today, because I'm not doing that anymore.
You stayed quiet for a number of years.
Yeah.
You took part in the Huffington Post investigation. You're taking part in our investigation here. What do you hope comes from this?
I want him locked up. And I want him to think about it every night before he goes to bed.
Obviously, Megan and Elizabeth, there's a pattern here.
Oh, yeah.
He goes after young, vulnerable, in some cases starstruck women. Do you think he's out there still doing this today?
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah. I don't think he will ever stop until he's put in jail or something.
Mm-mm.
Megan, I want to go back to something you said just a few moments ago about going to authorities, reporting this. Given the backlash from that video, did that impact your thought process in terms of reporting this and
Yeah.
seeking justice at that time, and why?
I almost felt like if I was the one responsible for getting him in legal trouble, that I would probably never live a happy life. With the amount of people that were in his, army at that time, I was actually scared for my safety. And like I said about having a baby, they actually had brought my son into it, and was kind of my breaking point to erase my video and just not talk about it anymore because they were threatening my 1-month-old son.
When you say threaten, what was being said?
Just death threats, the same death threats as me. I'll come kill you and I'll kill your son too.
People said this.
Yeah.
Do you know who these people were?
No.
Just people online, fans of Dahvie's.
Yeah.
And do you think Dahvie was motivating this? Do you think he was behind it, or were the fans just so rabid that they were doing this on their own?
Definitely crazed fans, insane, brainwashed fans.
Jesselyn Cook, what is it about Dahvie Vanity that engenders such maniacal loyalty amongst his following?
I think he presents himself as really relatable. He, understands what they're going through. He's their friend. He's there for them. He cares about them. You see that kind of messaging on his social media all the time. And so you now see these legions of fans who idolize him and will come to his defense. Like after my first article with Sebastian came out, so many of the women who came forward and spoke out in the piece were then terrorized by these teenage girls in his fan base. And, Dahvie definitely has incited that too. If you listen to some of his lyrics, he will go after his accusers. He'll call them sluts and like other terrible things. And I think they see defending him as their way of like returning their side of this friendship they have, or they think they have.
Yeah.
Do you think the climate has changed, Jesselyn, in terms of both people coming forward and law enforcement now taking an interest in this in a more aggressive way?
I certainly hope so. The hope is that he will be held accountable for his actions. And it has been really inspiring to see so many women come forward and share their stories. After, Sebastian and I published our first story, the reason we ran a second one is because so many women reached out to us saying, this happened to me too.
Now, Elizabeth and Megan, you two have become friends over the years.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you are in constant contact. This tragedy, this victimization by Dahvie Vanity in some strange way bring you together in sort of your own two-woman survivors group? Is that saying too much?
I think for me, Blood kind of made a community of friends that I met online. And then as we've all kind of phased out of that, we kind of all realize now that most of us were victims or survivors of that situation. And I think it's a trauma bond. Like the people that lived with him at the time that were my friends, and Megan and other girls that I know that this happened to, like we are all bonded in that way, that we experience the same trauma and we understand each other in a way that other people can't.
Definitely.
And what do you say to any other young woman who's communicating with him now, talking about meeting him, infatuated with him in any way?
Don't meet him. It's not worth it. Like, it's better to have him be mad at you for saying no and block you than to go through what it would be if you went through with it.
Elizabeth, as we sit here tonight, what did Dahvie Vanity take away from you?
He took away my innocence, and he took away my whole teenage years. I mean, I spent all of my years in high school in love with a 30-year-old man, spending all of my free time with older men, and I don't think I had any of the normal experiences that a 16-year-old girl should have, and that's all his fault.
Elizabeth, what did Dahvie Vanity, Megan, what did Dahvie Vanity take away from you?
Also my innocence, quite literally, because I had no other experience before him. He was all that I knew, and with him being so romantic and charming, I thought it was real for quite some time before I finally realized what he was doing. So I definitely still carry that with me sometimes. He's altered my perception of what love is, because he told me that he loved me, and I believed it.
And Elizabeth, you could feel this.
Yeah, I feel the same way. Like, I think Megan and I have very similar experiences and feelings on this subject, and yeah, it's hard, and I feel for anyone else who was there with us.
Why did you think it was so important, both Megan and Elizabeth, to come forward and tell the story publicly in this forum, which is going to be seen by a lot of people?
So I think what really happened was there was a post that I think Elizabeth made, or maybe one of his merch girls at the time, about, I mean, it was a super long, sentimental, touchy post about how great of a man he is, and how, you know, everybody holds him to such a, you know, high standard, and he's, you know, the best man ever. And it kind of made me sick to read that, because I knew things that other people didn't, and I wasn't sleeping well at night knowing that I'm keeping something inside that is wrong and that should be spoken out to potentially help future victims.
Is there anything, Megan, that will get you past this, that will give you closure, that will allow you to heal?
Probably just this, talking about it and not being afraid to hide anymore. Because honestly, his career is crashing and burning as we speak. And I truly never thought I would see the day, but now that that's actually happening, I feel like I have a pretty solid platform to speak, and I never have felt that way.
Elizabeth, what will give you closure, peace of mind?
I just think that speaking about it is something that I put off for a really long time. And I think just kind of being on this is a lot of closure for me, because I know that he will never try to reach out to me again, and that wall is closed and that chapter's done.
And what do you say, Elizabeth, to Dahvie Vanity tonight? If he's listening to the show, what do you want him to know?
He's definitely listening, and he hurt me and a lot of other women in so many ways, and it needs to stop, and it can't continue. And it's disgusting, and no one should have to go through what anyone else has gone through again.
And what makes you think, Elizabeth, that he's watching this tonight? What convinces you of that?
Oh, when I was friends with him, he would watch every hateful video about him. He would sit there, and anytime any post or anything that was said about him negative, he would text all of his friends and be like, get on this and defend me. And he would send that to me all the time, and I would do it. And I think he's still doing that. There's no way that's changed.
Are you willing to go forward, Elizabeth, now and report this to authorities, to cooperate in any way, given the time frame and the potential limits and statute of limitations here? Are you willing to file a report, to talk to authorities, to talk to law enforcement?
Yeah. I still haven't talked to my parents about it, so that would be my first step, and doing that with them would probably be the next.
Okay. And Megan, what about you? Do you feel compelled to go to law enforcement to try the best you can to be a part of this growing group of young women who are trying to get justice?
Yes, absolutely. And I definitely feel like even though I don't have any solid evidence, because he would constantly erase it, I think what I have to say is important. And even if it's, the slightest chance in the world that what I say can help, then I will. And in fact, I've actually been in contact with Mal. She got me in contact with somebody who's working on an investigation. So
We're talking about Mal Levy, who is a survivor herself and who has been on this program and has become an advocate pretty much for other survivors. And what do you say, Megan, to Dahvie tonight, if he's watching this? Obviously, Elizabeth thinks he is, and I don't think she's wrong.
So I've actually kind of been looking at the live comments. It's been a little bit distracting. Yeah, I shouldn't be doing it, but I did see him in the chat, and he said, "That never happened." That's it. That never happened. So yes.
Dahvie Vanity is in the chat as we speak, and I don't always look at the comments because I need to keep my head in the game at the interview, but you're sure that's Dobby as we speak in the comments now?
Yes, this was a little bit ago. I believe he's banned now, thankfully, but he's definitely still watching. So if I have anything to say to him, it would be just, for somebody who is always being preachy. Sorry if you hear my dog. For somebody who's always being preachy about, the power of the universe and the law of attraction, you think that you would realize by now that what you are doing and what you're putting out there is making its way back to you as we speak. And I'm just going to sit back and watch and do my part. That's all.
He spouts all this spiritual stuff in these live streams on Instagram and
fake.
And how, you need to be in touch, and this is, the way we think now. And what's it like for you guys to see this stuff?
Well, when I was friends with him, I would see him get on his phone and look up inspirational quotes and rip them off and post them online, acting like it was his preachy message when he, in fact, took it from someone else. He doesn't believe the own things he says.
I should say that we've reached out to Dahvie Vanity, Jesus Torres, to get comment on this, and we've been unable to reach him. I believe we had a phone number for him, and he did not respond. There's some indication that he's reaching out as well on the comments tonight. And I should say, if he does want to talk, I'll talk to him, and he can DM me on Twitter, and we'll do that, which I think would
probably has you blocked.
Very interesting. Yeah, I'm not. He's had ample opportunity to reach out before, so this has been going on. It's not going away anytime soon. Jesselyn Cook, final thoughts tonight in terms of, all the time you've spent on different subjects and reporting. And this case seems to be, right in the Me Too movement, along with so many others we've covered in the last couple of years. Do you think we'll ultimately get justice here?
I hope so. Just to say again, it's been really inspiring seeing so many women be so brave and come forward, especially given the harassment that's been leveled at so many other survivors. I hope for the best in this case.
Jesselyn, thanks very much. Elizabeth, final thoughts tonight. Is there anything else you want people to know?
If you're talking to him, it's not worth it. No one should have to go through that. And for anyone who has any experiences, talk to Chris. It's a lot of help. And do something about it, because this can't continue.
Megan Hood, final thoughts tonight. Is there anything else you want people to know about your experience and how you're doing today and what you want to see in terms of justice in this case?
So not just with Dahvie, but with anybody, if you are being coerced or groomed by an older man and you're underage, or, woman or whatever, you're not alone, and you never will be alone. Definitely reach out, seek help, go to the authorities, do what you have to do, and don't stay silent, because it will only hurt you in the long run.
All right. Megan, Elizabeth, thank you for being courageous and brave and coming forward and telling your stories tonight, and undoubtedly helping so many other young women in this case and in other cases like it. Jesselyn Cook, thanks for being with us. Good luck and continued good reporting at the Huff Post. I appreciate your time tonight. You all have a good evening, and stay healthy and stay safe with all this going on in the world today. I appreciate it. We're going to continue reporting on the Dahvie Vanity story, and I should tell you, and we'll put this information up both on links on the YouTube channel as well as on social media. Ashley, Lilly, and Mal Levy, who we talked about earlier. Ashley also is a survivor and has been on this show, but Ashley and Mal are putting together a group of video statements from survivors, and it will give you the information so that you can reach out. They're also coordinating with law enforcement authorities, some of whom I've actually spoken with, and there is a very active investigation and a lot of interest from local and federal law enforcement, I can report tonight. So we will stay on top of it. We have a fascinating insider in the world of Dahvie Vanity, who's scheduled to be on next week. We also have been doing some interviews on our other investigative focus on this program, Onision, Greg James Jackson, the YouTube psycho brat from Washington State, who seems to have gone quiet, at least temporarily, from YouTube at least, and is now, quote unquote, a male model on his OnlyFans. We've been talking to people who have been on the inside of his discords, moderators. And very soon you'll be hearing the voice of Onision, as you've never heard it before, the insider's view. We'll have that for you very soon. And we also are working on a project that I think you'll find interesting with our friend Wes Most, a YouTube streamer who's had a series of interesting experiences. So we'll be working on that tomorrow, and more news on that later in the week. But thank you very much for tuning in and giving attention to this very important topic. You know, I go back to the example of the Jeffrey Epstein case and how, you know, the Miami Herald just kept digging away and chipping away and talking to survivors and giving them a voice and giving them the courage and support and safety net to come forward to be identified. And that's what we try to do here on this program. So thanks again for tuning in. You have a wonderful evening, and we will touch base later in the week. Stay safe, stay healthy, and remember, I'll be watching. Good night.